Welcome to Talking Business, a podcast produced in Melbourne, Australia. The podcast is available on the Acast site, my own website, the Apple Podcast Store, or wherever you go to get your podcasts. Or you can get it at the Business Acumen website at www.businessacumen.biz. I am Leon Gettler. My job is to review and monitor the week's news in business, finance and economics. I bring it all to you every week. For the most exclusive access to leading economists and business leaders from around the world, subscribe to Talking Business from our website, leongettler.com, or wherever your favourite podcast platform is. This is episode number 30 in our series for 2025, and today's date is Friday, September the 5th. First, I'll be talking to Marc Washbourne, the co-founder of ASX-listed tech company ReadyTech. We'll talk about its software innovations, like JobReady, which matches job seekers to find positions, its student management system, and its software for local government and justice system. It's also examining how AI can be used as part of its offering. And I'll be talking to RMIT economist Sinclair Davidson about the outcomes of the government's tax and productivity roundtable. But first, let's talk to Marc Washbourne.
Well, Marc, ReadyTech sells education, payroll and administration software to, over 4,000 customers? And you're one of Australia's original startups. So you released your first product in 1999. Is that right?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. So, we started the company over 20 years ago now. And our first product was called JobReady. We found an opportunity at that time for a software product for employment providers, helping job seekers get back into the workforce. That became a very successful product for us, and essentially the software was there to help identify job seekers' skills and match those people to jobs and help keep them in jobs, and that really set us on our way. So look, you're right. I think that we probably are one of the original startups. We were bootstrapped, we were self-funded. There wasn't a large amounts of capital around as there are now for technology startups. But look, over time, we started to look at where else we could have an impact. And, we entered the education market with a student management system that also became very successful. So, over 20 years, we've been building software, and I think we're getting quite good at it.
And so it's all over Australia, your customers?
Absolutely, yeah. So we do have a very strong Australia and New Zealand presence. Many of our software systems are helping our customers to adhere to localized compliance requirements, reporting requirements, and so forth. We have a lot of government customers and also linked to government programs as well. So predominantly we are across the ANZ. But over the last few years, we've also started to explore new territories. We won a large contract in the UK with the Ministry of Justice with our courts management software. That was a big breakthrough. And that's really provided somewhat of a launch pad into the UK and across Europe. Just won our first customer in Sweden, actually. So very Australia, New Zealand focused, but certainly with global ambitions into the future.
So you're expanding now into the UK, and where else are you looking to expand?
Well, I think that our software products, if you sort of look through them, education, we look after colleges, TAFEs and universities with our student management system, our government products, particularly for local government, as well as our justice products, which is really helps courts and tribunals to manage, all of the workflows that are required across the judiciary. The portability is strongest into Commonwealth countries. Often what we find is that they have, very sort of similar frameworks and setups for the way these types of organisations or institutions run. So that's why we've seen success so far in territories like Canada and also the UK, and that's really where we're focused on the next legs of growth into those Commonwealth countries where the products transfer the best.
It's quite a niche market, isn't it?
Look, I think that across education, workforce, local government, these are quite large markets, in their own right. And look, really, I think what the software does very well, it meets these customer needs very closely. These are vertically focused, if you will, or very market focused enterprise software. But the education software, the education market is huge. It's large here in Australia across the whole of tertiary education that we support. Of course, you look to the global opportunity as well. That's just one of our markets. So if putting it all together, the addressable markets in which we operate, there's huge runway for us in the future.
No. When I said niche, I didn't mean small markets. I didn't mean that. But I mean quite distinctive. They have quite distinctive needs.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. Sorry, I misinterpreted your question. I think you're absolutely right. I think that the requirements can be very complex. The requirements of an education provider, a large TAFE or university or a large courts, these are, very specific requirements, across a whole range of record keeping and compliance and workflows. So I think that's really the success of these products, is that they are designed to meet those needs closely, and then customers can then configure their own workflows and also by subscribing to a software as a service model, our customers are able to then effectively get updates and upgrades to keep those systems in line with any changes, legislative changes or industry type changes. And that's really the model. And that helps customers to become, really long-term partners of ours and very long-term customer relationships.
I would imagine there'd be a huge market in the public sector.
Absolutely. I think that part of this, just as many of our private sector clients, a good deal of the government clients, facing very similar challenges in managing their critical software infrastructure. They are upgrading to the cloud. They are seeking to be more efficient and automate more, but they're also really seeking to upgrade the customers and the end user experience. If I look at local government, this is an area where, the clients are really seeking to deliver services to citizens in a much more digitized and modern ways. And I think that, there's a very strong expectation now from any consumer that whoever you're interacting with, has a very strong and elegant digital solution for you to interact with. There's been some great examples of that across government with systems like MyGov. I think we've all become very used to that, and vaccine certificates. And so there's a huge, long-term opportunity and trend towards digitization of government services that we're part of.
But I would imagine, and like you were one of the pioneers in this area, and sort of you started your first services in 1999. I'd imagine the transition to the cloud would have made an enormous difference.
Absolutely. I think that there are so many compelling reasons to move to the cloud. First of all, it allows us to deploy new releases to customers a lot faster than before. It's a lot easier to connect systems, across an ecosystem of different products and different software. Of course, it allows mobility with the dawn of the release of the mobile phone. That was a huge game changer as well. And now, of course, we're in the next wave of technologies because we know we're into the age of artificial intelligence and generative AI. And again, the underlying technology in the cloud is absolutely critical to enjoy the benefits of the next ranges of technologies that are coming down and emerging. So yeah, I think we were very early with cloud. We started to transition everything to the cloud in about 2005. I think that's been part of the key to success. When you're a technology company, you've got to keep investing back. Technology will continue to move on, and you need to keep investing back into that technology and really embracing technology and new innovation on behalf of your customers.
And you're doing the same with AI?
We are very much starting to. So look, we're very excited about the opportunities that AI brings, particularly around this new generation of generative AI technologies and the use of large language models. If you think about something like an education provider, store an enormous amount of data about those students and the insights that can be gained, the elevation of the student experience that can be delivered through the use of these models and this data. These opportunities are very profound. So we've certainly started to make investments, and we've started to release some early versions of AI-enabled product for our customers. But it's an enormously exciting time.
And of course, you've got all that enormous amount of data, not only in education, but also at the court system as well.
Absolutely. I think that phrase is often used is, data is the oil of the 21st century. We're sitting on a lot of it. We have, as I say, over 4,000 customers. And as you rightly point out, that there's millions of students and workers and citizens across these platforms, and, huge volumes of data. If you look at the case of courts, the ability for courts to look at patterns of resolutions and outcomes across court cases and what that might mean for consistency across the justice system, is a huge opportunity. We're very early on that, but these are the types of opportunity you have when you have such rich data sets.
So where do you see ReadyTech heading in the next 5 years?
It's a really great question. I think, first of all, we've achieved a lot, but we have a lot more to do. We have really great people here at the company. We call them ReadyTechers. I think they really care a lot about what we do. I think we believe that, we can lead the next waves of digital transformation across these markets. There are many organizations that we're not working yet that we would like to be. And as I say, we'll keep innovating. We're currently fascinated by the opportunity with AI to transform the lives of our customers. But look, ultimately, we want to build a very significant and important company from Australia and to grow that company globally. And I think with scale, that means that we can do more and do more good for the communities we work in. And that's very exciting. So a long-term ambition as well is to build this as a $1 billion company. We're on the right track towards that, and that's that's an ambition that is very dear to us.
That is quite extraordinary. And Mark will be watching it very closely.
Thank you so much, Leon. Thanks for the great questions. Enjoyed it.
And now let's talk to RMIT economist Sinclair Davidson.
Well, Sinclair, what was your view of the productivity and tax roundtable?
As always with these things, Leon, I was a bit underwhelmed. I kind of think that this is a theatre more than sort of an economic event. I think for theatre it was magnificent. There was lots of talk, there was lots of light, there was lots of heat. But in the end, there's not too much coming out of it the other end that we didn't really expect. So from a citizen watching a bit of a circus, really enjoyable. From an economist thinking, gee, what's going to happen next with the economy? I was very much underwhelmed.
There were movements on housing.
Yes, there was a lot of talk about housing. The challenge that we face around housing, of course, is that housing is mostly a state government issue. So having the federal government run a Senate about a state government issue without then being prepared to follow through and dare I say it, bully the states into doing something sensible around housing is kind of a big talk fest. And it really fits into their story about intergenerational equity. But it's not actually going to deliver houses on the ground for people to live in who want to live in those houses.
Seemed to be a lot of talk about tax reform, and Jim Chalmers says that we on his agenda, which will be taken to cabinet, but
Yes.
we don't quite know what exactly is planned, and that'll be interesting to watch.
I think we know exactly what is being planned. An increase in taxes is being planned, an increase in taxes on superannuation, an increase on taxes on wealth somehow discovered, an increase in taxes on corporations, all these sorts of things are sort of, dare I say it, Labour hobby horses. We're probably going to see another movement on things such as franking credits and the like. So an increase in taxes has become what is now known as tax reform in Australia. And to be quite blunt, it is the last thing Australia needs is to have increases in taxes, because the challenge that our economy faces is not that we don't raise enough revenue. If you have a look at budget papers and the like, revenue to GDP is close to all-time highs. So we've got rivers of gold flowing into Canberra. So the challenge isn't the government doesn't have enough money. The challenge is the government doesn't have as much money as it would like to finance its spending agenda. And that is the problem that we face right now, is that our eyes have become bigger than our bellies. Our ability to look at things and say, gee, let's spend money on this, that, or the next thing has actually grown exponentially, whereas our ability to finance all of that, and basically the willingness of the population to finance all of that, is very much at a different level. So the challenge the government has is a spending problem, not a revenue problem.
The fundamental issue is a tax reform, real tax reform around issues like, say, negative gearing and GST.
The negative gearing problem is not an issue. Quite frankly, deduction of expenditure incurred in the creation of a taxable asset is a stock standard principle of a good tax system. So negative gearing is not something I'd go anywhere near. I'd leave it alone. We know well what happened in 2019 when the then opposition went for negative gearing. They stayed in opposition for another period of time. We know that was it the 1980s or so, when the Hawke government tried to modify negative gearing, that all of a sudden rental prices spiraled out of control. So I'd be leaving that alone. The GST, again, it's just not clear to me where the GST can be tweaked. They can increase the rate. I doubt that any Australian government wants to go near that. They could start saying, well, okay, let's increase the base. But what are they going to do there? They're going to start saying, let's tax fresh food. That's going to be a huge problematic sell for any government. They could start saying things like, well, okay, let's tax private school fees like they have in the United States. That is also making enemies where you don't need to make enemies. So I kind of think it's going to be very brave government that's going to go anywhere near the GST. There's a lot of talk about negative gearing. There's a lot of talk about capital gains discounts. All of these things are a sort of ephemera and trivia in the grand scheme of things. The fact of the matter is there's no easy money lying around for governments to pick up at a low political price. They are going to have to leave a lot of skin behind if they want to go after any one of these things. And there's an article by John Black in the Australian Financial Review this morning talking about how much pain this is going to cause any government that tries to go near any of these sorts of things. So again, it's a great story.
Be that as it may, the government has a massive majority, bigger than we've ever seen before, and they can afford to lose some political capital if they make it part of their 2028 election campaign.
They could, but if I was looking at that calculus that you've just put to me now, they might not have that big majority after the next election. I mean, I kind of think in politics, you have to live from electoral cycle to electoral cycle. So right now, they've got a massive majority in the House. They can very easily cobble together a majority in the Senate. So to a large extent, they can pass a lot of the laws that they want to. It's just whether or not they will survive the next election doing so. The other thing is that they very much face the challenge that you could argue they don't have a mandate or anything that came out of the Productivity Commission. To be fair, the mandate story is also a bit of the theatre of politics, because if you've got a majority in the House and you can cobble together a majority in the Senate, you should more or less be able to do what you like. And we saw this happen after 2004 when John Howard passed his work choices laws, and he went in with a big majority. And Kevin Rudd had a big majority after 2007 and nearly lost it after one term. And Tony Abbott had a big majority after 2013 and nearly lost it after one term. I kind of think the electorate in a political sense is grumpy, and the electorate have been grumpy for a long, long time. So yes, you can simply say we've got the numbers, but in actual fact, if I was the Prime Minister, I would be wanting to go in with a good story, with take the population with you. And if you kind of think the very first summit that Bob Hawke did, it was that consensus building, take the population with you story, which every Labour government since then has tried to emulate and has kind of failed.
Anthony Albanese, more than any other Prime Minister I've seen, is very much risk averse, more than any other Prime Minister that I've seen.
Yes, I think that's correct. And I think he's risk averse for good reason. I mean, Mr. Albanese is actually a very good politician. So if he's been risk averse, he obviously sees something that some of his cabinet ministers do not see. And I think he's well aware people are grumpy. He's well aware things can turn very quickly. And he's already very, very well aware that the 2019 election, where the Labour Party went to the election with very similar talk of what they're talking about now, they got unexpectedly trounced. Now, of course, we might argue the opposition aren't up to it. There's all these sorts of arguments, but until the fight actually starts, you just don't know how things are going to pan out. So I would be very nervous going to the electorate and saying we had the numbers and we passed all these tax laws that we had never taken to an election before and that we got trounced 2 terms before that, and say, well, okay, guys, here we are. I think the days of just turning up on election day are well over. The government does actually have to, in addition to having the numbers, it will actually have to get on the ground legitimacy and credibility around what it's doing. It's made huge promises on housing that it simply cannot deliver. And that, I think, is the soft underbelly problem that they have.
So what do you see as the outcome from this summit?
I think very much the summit itself will sort of disappear into the froth and jetsam of sort of political life. I do think, however, that the government does have a problem around the fiscal side of the economy. We do need to start getting our financial house in order. I think they're going to really struggle to do that, raising more taxes. We do need to get debt down, and the Americans are pressuring us to spend more money on national security. What I have seen over the last week or so is sort of serious discussion about reining in the NDIS. That's going to be a big fight for the government too. So they're actually going to be trying to fight on taxation and the NDIS at the same time. And I think a lot of people care more about the NDIS than taxation.
Well, that's interesting with the NDIS, because that also involves states, because Butler, the health minister, is talking about moving these kids who are deemed to have autism. Let the schools handle that. Move them off the NDIS, which makes sense. However, my gut feeling is when I read that, I thought, yeah, but are the schools really well equipped for that?
Indeed, they are not. And as a matter of fact, what has been happening is that kids have been getting diagnoses at the request of the schools, so the schools would receive more federal funding. So all of a sudden, yes, they're going to say, yeah, sure, the schools are going to do that, which is probably a reasonable thing to do. But all of a sudden, that funding has to switch from federals to states. Now, again, because of the way our fiscal federation has worked out, the states don't have money. And this was made worse by John Howard's GST settlement. So it's going to be a big fight between the states and the Commonwealth, that's how our federation works. Okay, that's going to be fun to watch. But the mums and dads of these kids and their school principals are going to be basically slaughtering the federal government. So it's a huge fight to go down. And if you remember, for the last 15 years, I've been saying to you, Leon, we can't afford the NDIS as it's currently sort of structured because of this particular problem. And the federal government have now come to the table. They've realized we can't afford it too, but I just don't know how they're going to unravel the situation they find themselves in without leaving a lot of skin on the table again, at the same time when they've got to be leaving a lot of skin on the table for tax reform. So it's a big fight. And I think Mr. Albanese is quite reasonable in being risk averse.
So we'll watch this with great fascination.
We will indeed. It will be an enjoyable 18 months watching our friends in Canberra trying to unravel the scrambled egg that to be it's been bipartisan. The NDIS problem is bipartisan. It's been bipartisan. It's going to be great fun watching them trying to unscramble that egg. Who's going to be opportunistic and so on and so forth. So it's going to be very entertaining for us sort of political junkies.
Dude, Sinclair. Well, it's been great talking to you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
So what's happening in the news? Well, India and China are looking to work together in response to Trump's tariffs after years of border. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi landed in China on Sunday with the sting of Donald Trump's US tariffs still on top of his mind. Since Wednesday, tariffs on Indian goods bound for the US, like diamonds and prawns, now stand at 50%, which the US president says is punishment for Delhi's continued purchase of Russian oil. Experts say the levies threaten to leave lasting bruises on India's vibrant export sector and its ambitious growth targets. China's Xi Jinping, too, is trying to revive the sluggish Chinese economy at a time when sky-high US tariffs threaten to derail his plan. As the US-India relationship faces increasing headwinds, Modi is moving closer to Xi. Both countries are not only the most populous, but also have two of the largest economies in the world. Modi announced that flights between India and China, suspended since deadly troop clashes on the shared Himalayan border in 2020, would resume without providing a timeline. Xi said both sides need to approach and handle our relationship from a strategic high and long-term perspective, and that it is the right choice for both sides to be friends. Against this backdrop, the leaders of the world's two most populous countries may both be looking for a reset in their relationship, which has previously been marked by mistrust, a large part of it driven by border disputes. While the world has traditionally focused on the single most important bilateral relationship in the world, US and China, it is time we shift more focus on how the second and would-be third largest economies, China and India, can work together, said Quan Liu, founder and chief executive of the Wusawa Advisory, based in Beijing. Dialogue will be needed to help better manage the expectations of other powers who look to India-China as a key factor of Asia's wider stability. Antoine Levesque, senior fellow for South and Central Asian Defence Strategy and Diplomacy at IIS, says. And Nestlé has abruptly dismissed its CEO, Laurent Frege, for failing to disclose a romantic relationship with a subordinate, the Swiss food giant said on Monday, a dramatic removal exactly a year after he took the reins. The maker of products ranging from Kit Kat to Nesquik said that it had appointed veteran insider Philippe Navratil, who had headed the Nespresso coffee unit, as Fraser's successor with immediate effect. The shock departure threatens more volatility for Nestlé amid a tough consumer environment and the disruptive US trade tariffs. Nestlé said Fraser's departure follows an investigation overseen by Chairman Paul Bulke and the lead independent director Pablo Isla into an undisclosed romantic relationship with a direct subordinate, which breached the company's code of business conduct. And the Australian government is pressuring banks to lift prefab home lending to reach its target of 1.2 million new homes by 2029. Australia's second largest mortgage lender is being urged by the federal government to lend more to customers choosing prefabricated homes as Labor struggles to meet its ambitious target to tackle a chronic housing supply shortage. Federal Housing Minister Claire O'Neill and her senior advisors have met with Westpac to discuss the issue in meetings since Labor's landslide election win in May, with similar discussions on the agenda for ANZ and NAB. Prefabricated or modular homes are seen as part of the solution to Australia's housing supply crunch. They are relatively cheap and can be built in a fraction of the time it takes to build a traditional home because they are assembled off-site in a factory. At an investor roundtable in November last year, the Albanese government discussed working more closely with banks to improve access to prefabricated homes. In January, Commonwealth Bank began offering loans for prefabricated homes at the construction stage, allowing customers to borrow up to 60% of the total contract costs before the houses moved to land. In July, CBA took the commitment further, lending up to 80% of the costs for a contract of up to $1.5 million if a customer chooses one of the bank's approved manufacturers. But O'Neill said CBA needs the support of its three major rivals to further boost the uptake of prefabricated homes. Other major banks, including Westpac, currently lend to prefabricated homes once they are fixed on land, but not during the construction period. That means customers need to cover the upfront cost of the build. The big four banks will play a crucial role in making prefabricated housing accessible to everyday Australians, O'Neill said. We will continue to raise the prefab questions with Westpac, ANZ and NAB, so our economy can develop financing solutions that match the speed and innovation of modern prefabricated construction. Prefabricated housing used to sit under the industry and science portfolio until a recent restructuring brought it into O'Neill's portfolio. The change signalled the importance of the technology to Labor, with the government lagging on its target to build 1.2 million new homes by 2029. And Energy and Climate Change Minister Chris Bowen insists the government will achieve its target of 82% renewables by 2030, but he concedes Labor has more work to do to win over regional consumers at the coalface of Australia's energy transition. Bowen's confidence in the government's ability to realise its clean energy goal comes despite mounting scepticism among some energy analysts and vocal opposition to the renewables rollout from green groups and farmers in regional areas. Chris Bowen says Labor can and will achieve its 82% renewables target by 2030. I believe 82% renewable energy by 2030 can and will be achieved, Bowen said. It won't happen automatically or inevitably. A target which everyone agrees will happen automatically is hardly worth having. It's meant to drive decisions and investment, and that's exactly what it's doing. Energy consultancy Rystad has forecast a slow rollout of wind and transmission projects across Australia means the government is not likely to meet its 82% renewables goal until 2037 and will only be at 60% by 2030. But Bowen says the massive pipeline of new investment outlined in a major report by the market operator last month put Labor well on track to meet the ambitious renewable energy goal it took to the 2022 election. The plan to achieve 82% renewables underpins Labor's existing target of 43% emissions cuts by 2030, but some climate policy experts have suggested that ongoing delays to the rollout could constrain the government's 2025 ambition. Labor is just a few weeks away from announcing its plans for Australia's 2035 emissions reduction target and is facing pressure from business and climate groups to set an ambitious target as it attempts to secure the right to host next year's UN Climate Summit in Adelaide. And the Albanese government says a new report proves age restrictions online can work with the right approach by tech giants as Facebook and Instagram owner Meta platforms flies in top executives to meet with Australia's online safety regulator. Meta's global head of safety, Antigone Davis, and engineering director Dustin Ho will visit Australia this week to meet with eSafety Commissioner Julie Inman-Grant, days after the release of a 1,200-page report into ways to stop children accessing pornography and harmful material online. The long-awaited age assurance trial found it is technically possible to stop the majority of minors accessing pornographic websites and social media while protecting privacy, but the real-world effectiveness of any reform will rest on coordination across all tech platforms. It also found there's no single ubiquitous technology that can be rolled out across all realms of the internet. The findings contradict many of the arguments made by some of the biggest tech giants in the world, including Meta, which has spent the better part of the past year insisting there's no easy way to age-gate without jeopardising the privacy of all users. Davis and Ho will meet with Inman-Grant on Thursday to discuss, among other topics, recent reports that Meta's artificial intelligence chatbots were allowed to engage in romantic or sensual conversations with children. Meta said it's updating its AI chat policies. His latest round of talks between the government and the tech giant ahead of the December start date for the government's world-first social media ban for under 16s. The trial was commissioned ahead of the new laws, which will force social media platforms including YouTube, Snapchat, Instagram and TikTok to keep underage children off their platforms or risk fines of up to $49.5 million. It was conducted by the UK-based age check certification scheme and consultancy firm KJR, who were tasked with figuring out whether it was possible to control how children access the internet. It assessed more than 60 technologies across 48 companies, including Apple, Google, TikTok, Epic Games and Meta. Communications Minister Anika Wells said the report proves tech giants are equipped with tools to better protect young people from inappropriate content and harm. While there's no one-size-fits-all solutions to age assurance, this trial shows there are many effective options and, importantly, that user privacy can be safeguarded, she said. The trial found there was a range of ways to check a person's age online, including verifying age with official documents, inferring a person's age from their behaviour, or estimating their age from their face and voice. It left the decision about which method to use to the government. A key challenge to introducing age gating is deep disagreement between social media companies, including Meta and Snapchat, and tech giants like Apple and Google over whether age restrictions should be enforced by social media platforms, each app developer, or once by the App Store itself. Coordination among dominant infrastructure providers is essential if any truly ecosystem-wide age assurance model is to succeed, the report reads. And households will be about $4,000 a year better off, business investment boosted and real wages higher under a major tax reform package proposed by a leading economist to meet Treasurer Jim Chalmers' economic roundtable goal of a better tax system. State property stamp duty would be abolished, GST-free items such as private education taxable, most small businesses no longer exempt from payroll tax, and personal income tax slashed by $43 billion a year under the combined three reform packages. Corporate tax would be reduced for most companies to encourage investment, while franking credits for dividends paid to shareholders will be made less generous. Highly profitable miners, banks and supermarkets operating in less competitive sectors would pay more corporate tax. The modelling was conducted by Chris Murphy, the economist who is undertaking separate work for the Productivity Commission on its proposed radical company tax shake-up. He was also hired by former Treasury Secretary Ken Henry's sweeping tax review in 2009. Murphy estimates total consumer welfare would be about $43 billion a year higher under his proposal, which is the equivalent of about $40,000 each for the 11 million households in Australia. Murphy estimates his combined three reform packages for property, companies and households would increase real GDP by almost 6%, which is about $170 billion in today's dollars. And Heloise Pratt is working to settle a bitter dispute over the future of the billionaire family's thorny investment vehicle. The renewed discussions come after months of public acrimony and hours after the stoush with a former husband, Alex Weislitz, was due to be heard in court. Pratt and Weislitz are now working on an agreement after earlier deferring the first day of hearings scheduled in the Victoria Supreme Court. Weislitz and Pratt married in 1994 and have 3 children together. They separated in 2014 and for several years maintained a united front until relations soured. The acrimony became public in November after Pratt filed a suit against Weislitz. Key to the dispute has been a battle for control of Thorney, Richard Pratt's investment arm that he gifted to his daughter and son-in-law in 2005. In the subsequent 20 years, its assets have increased from $500 million to more than $1 billion. Pratt claimed Weislitz falsified records at their jointly owned private vehicle known as Jumarjo, which was the trustee of the Alex Family Trust. The trust was set up to provide for their 3 children. Pratt alleged Weislitz falsified board meeting records and inappropriately used more than $20 million in loans from a family trust to buy property for his new partner, Becca Babahani, finance her music career. Weislitz and Babahani had a daughter together in December 2019, and Pratt and her supporters started to fear Weislitz had not ring-fenced Thorney. Pratt believes Thorney's assets should go to their 3 children and that Weislitz's new daughter, Storm, should not inherit any of that wealth. Pratt initially accused Weislitz of criminality, but that was withdrawn. Weislitz claims Pratt abdicated responsibilities as a director of their private family companies, and the pair had an agreement in which he would run the family businesses. Both have denied the allegations made against them. Pratt was seeking to have a trustee appointed over Thorney. She alleged Weislitz was simply an executive of Thorney, the ownership of which belongs to a family. And organised criminal groups are now behind an increase in shoplifting. Stolen steaks are now being sold out of car boots to struggling restaurants before being plated up for diners, and makeshift clothes shops are popping up in private homes with a range of in-vogue styles in every size. These are the bizarre points of sale appearing on suburban streets across Australia, a new black market that has exploded over the past 18 months in an intensifying retail theft crisis, costing retailers more than $9 billion a year. The chief executives of Coles, Woolworths, Dan Murphy's operator Endeavour and retail giant Wesfarmers are among the latest to express their growing alarm at the deepening losses and harm caused by shoplifters. Though the problem is national, Victoria emerged as Australia's capital of retail theft after offending reached its highest level on record this year. Behind the alarming figures is an intricate network of criminal groups. Their ruthless operation makes retail jobs increasingly dangerous, and stolen goods are feeding a well-oiled black market that authorities are struggling to intercept. The unfolding problem isn't petty shoplifting, though that's certainly happening too. The business model is completely different. You have in your mind a teenager stealing a pair of socks. That's not this. This is professional. Anthony Herity, Chief Executive of Super Retail Group, whose brands include Rebel Sport, said this month. Professional thieves are offering weapon-wielding repeat offenders, walking out with trolleys of groceries, armfuls of merchandise, and cash, often without resistance from staff, who are instructed to keep out of harm's way. It's a response that the criminals have learnt to use to their advantage. 2/3 of the 800,000 incidents lodged last year through retail theft reporting platform Aurora involved a weapon, typically knives, hammers, and box cutters. Grocery giants Coles and Woolworths have been rapidly rolling out anti-theft measures as supermarkets fend off ongoing attacks. The number of threatening situations happening at Coles has risen 28% nationally. Woolworths dealt with more than 6,000 violent incidents last year, with Victoria accounting for more than half of those. It's an everyday occurrence, said Mike Schneider, the chief executive of hardware giant Bunnings. Michael Townsley, a professor at Griffith University School of Criminology and Criminal Justice, who researches retail theft, said statistics backed up the view that organised crime groups were the main driver of the recent uptick in retail crime. About 10% of offenders are responsible for 60% of all harm and loss, according to Aurora, the platform for retailers to prevent crime. While organised crime syndicates exist in both New South Wales and Victoria and are players in illicit tobacco, drugs and prostitution, Townsley, who is a consultant to the National Retail Association, said retail theft, especially in Victoria, had emerged as a gainful area for criminals. And that's it for this week. And next week I'll be talking to Francis Prince Thangasamy, the Managing Director for Asia Pac of Lumen Technologies. We'll talk about how Lumen helps companies digitise now and remain relevant despite market conditions. And I'll be talking to independent economist Saul Leslake about what we can expect from the government's tax and productivity roundtable. For the most exclusive access to leading economists and business leaders from around the world, subscribe to Talking Business from our website leongettler.com or whatever your favourite podcast platform is. If you like Talking Business, please leave us a review with Apple Podcasts. Thank you in advance. In the meantime, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, or X as it's now known, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube.